Hey everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of the France native reptile species. So I said I think I said this at the end of part 1, I ended up having to split this into 2 parts just because there are quite a unique number of reptiles in France. And we hit the 30-minute mark towards the end of the video, and I just decided to make it into a part 2. So sorry if everyone wanted to watch it all in one part, but some of these countries are going to be 2, maybe 3 parts. But let's first get into our first reptile of part 2. So this is a type of slow worm, but this slow worm is called the Italian slow worm. So I'll bring it up on screen now. It may not look any different from from a normal common European slow worm. But they are in fact a completely different subspecies. It was believed that these were the same, obviously the same as common European slow worms, but then in 2013 a study was made and it was found that they were 2 different types of slow worms. Now, as we got like with the common slow worm, when they're hunting food, it usually takes place around early morning, around dawn, and then later on in the days as night approaches, mainly because that's the safest time for them to be out. And when they are seeking food, they hunt slugs, spiders, beetles, insects and their larvae, and their hibernation takes place between October until March, depending on where they are in the country. And they usually like to go into a hole which they've created, or equally one which already exists, like an old rat tunnel. They are oviviviparous, and they follow mating rituals from April until June. And the females retain their eggs in incubation for about 3 months and then gives birth to 6 to 10 already formed slow worms. So what that oviviviparous means is that they give birth to live young. And that usually happens in around August-September time. Now, these, just trying to looking over my notes. Yeah, they're basically the same as the common European slow worm, but they are, like I said, a completely different subspecies. Now, if we move on to our next one, which is the Catalonian wall lizard, which, if I find the picture now, I can bring it up for you guys. So here is the Catalonian wall lizards, and these are very similar to the other lizards in the subgenus of Prodigious's. I cannot pronounce that because it is Latin and I can't pronounce Latin. But these species were once described as a subspecies as the Liberian wall lizard, but has now been elevated to a species status with 4 subspecies. These are slender lizards with long tails, narrow tapered heads, and long hind toes and stout legs. Their colours are variable, although they are usually grey, between a grey and a brown. And often very subtle spots and stripes along their backs and flanks can be seen, and these can be more distinguished in the females. The underside, so their belly, is usually much like a cream or a beige with sometimes a red tint to it. Adults can grow usually between 15 and 20 centimeters in length from the nose to the tip of the tail, which is how a lot of reptiles are usually measured in. And their body length can be as little as 1/3 of the total length so their tail makes up the other 2/3 of their body, like most lizards. They have a lifespan of about 5 years, and they are adaptable at wall climbing, and they can be found in a large number of habitats and frequently around houses and other buildings. Although being a Mediterranean species, they are able to inhabit mountain habitats with cold winters up to 2,000 meters altitude, so like the Pyrenees, the Systema Ibereco and the Systema Betico. And these were, for the first time, they were in 2007. They were recorded in both La Droima and Vaucluse, just east of the Rhone River. It doesn't say anything about their food in the notes that I've managed to find on these, but like most lizards, they're going to be like small insects, grubs, beetles, crickets. A lot of small lizards like these size usually tend to eat more or less the same thing. They don't really have much of a varied diet. Now the next one we have is the pygmy needle lizard, which I did see that picture here somewhere. There we go. So here you go. Here is the pygmy needle lizard. Now these are these usually measure less than 12 centimeters, and 2/3 of which is the tail, which is rather thick, as you can see in this picture. The tail usually starts about here on lizards, so just behind the legs, and as you can see, the tail is rather long and it is quite thick at the top, and as it gets to the tip, it does kind of thin out a little bit. Its head and body are flattened in appearance, and its dorsal and lateral scales are rough with large needled pointed scales on the back and rectangular on the tail, giving the appearance of a fir cone. And the scales of the head are smooth with a very clear demarcation between them of those and the body at the level of the neck. So you can see it kind of just here. You can see a slight colour change where the head and the neck begins. The legs are usually quite thin, smaller at the front, and provide large fingers terminated by a claw, especially on the hind legs. And they have a solid coloration as a dark brown, dull brown, grey, or almost black, sometimes with a black vertebral line. So a black vertebral line basically means they have like a dark black line going across their vertebrae, which is their spine. And the ventral surface is usually yellow to orange, mainly in males, whitish towards the throat, so that'd be their belly. They're most frequent in the forest and dense vegetation environments, but they can be found in scrubs, crops, rocky slopes, or uneven low bearing walls, and with a preference to partial shade area and close to water. They're found from sea level up to about 1,400 meters in Corsica and are present on almost all of the island with the exception of the eastern coast. They are oviparous species, and mating occurs quickly at the end of wintering, and the female lays about 4 eggs of about 8 millimeters in diameter in May or June, and they will hatch between late July and early September. And once considered scarce, they are now considered at least concern, having probably been overlooked due to their small size and unusual appearance. And again, just like the wall lizard, they are going to be eating small bugs and insects. That's why I haven't put a lot of that details in my notes, because a lot of these small lizards all generally eat the same thing. Next we have the Bedrega's rock lizard. These are quite a beautiful lizard with the picture. And these can only be found on the islands of Corsica and Sardinia, and their status is near threatened. And these beluga lizards appears flat and has a long, slender shape, and they have a pointed nose and a very robust limbs, which they very easily climb vertical surfaces, and their scales are smooth, not needled, and glued to the body. Their tail is up to twice as long as their body, and they are easily recognised by their tapered head and pointed nose. Their pattern and coloration can be quite variable, and there seem to be little external differences between the sexes. Outside of mating season, when adults are brownish grey with a dark, fine-lined net pattern on their backs. Females are usually browner than males, and the males in mating season acquire a blue belly, blue lines, and blue dots in their flanks. So I believe this picture we have here is of a male. And the net-like pattern seems to turn into a pattern of white dots. And juveniles are discernible by their bright azure blue tails. So the juveniles usually have a bright blue tail. Adult males can grow in total length, including the tail, up to about 30 centimeters. And they occupy a range of habitats from sea level to about 1,000 meters above sea level, but are more abundant in the mountainous areas, where they're found on rocks, cliffs, and ruins. They're very good swimmers, and their diet consists of insects and their larvae, like most small lizards. And depending on the altitude, mating usually occurs between April and June, and the female lays around about 3 to 6 eggs, usually in July, and the incubation lasts 8 to 9 weeks, and the young that are born from July to September are usually 5 to 6.5 centimeters in length. And winter season dormancy can be as long as 6 months at altitude, so they kind of go into a state of hibernation. Next up we have the Aurelio's rock lizard. So here we have one here. These are a Pyrenean endemic, and they occupy the alpine stage of the chain extending from the southern slope of the Mont Rogue Massif, which is in the province of Catalina and Spain, and to the Massif of the Peak of Serre, which is the Andoria. And its range is curiously divided into two distinct nuclei, about 15 kilometers apart, and like they say, they've been found only in the mid-Pyrenees region of France. So they mainly are around, like I said, they're mainly around the Pyrenees. They're a very small lizard whose size and morphology are quite similar to those of the wall lizard, and their body measures approximately 5 centimeters to 6 centimeters in adults, with the tail being twice the length, giving the total of about 15 centimeters. They're usually a grey-brown to hazelnut brown, as with the other two Pyrenean lizards. The back does not have a true dark vertebrae line. It is similar dark to those two dorsal lateral lines or bands that frame it. So you see one here. These are the dorsal lines. So there'll be another one just about here on the other side. But the tail on the hand bears a diffused dark longitude line continuing the central coloration of the back. So as you see here, the tail is very light in colour. They're usually found from about 1,960 meters to 3,077 meters in France, where conditions are harsh and where hibernation can be extremely long. Their mating takes place as soon as the snow melts, and females lay their eggs in early summer and they hatch in late summer. They feed on various invertebrates, so insects, insects and the larvae, arachnids and worms, just like most lizards. So there's not very much to know about these, but just because of where they are usually found in the regions. So next up we have the Bonnell's lizard, or the Pyrenean rock lizard, as it's also called. And these are usually in the central western part of the Pyrenees, and its range extends from west to east, from the Pic du Midi Usua Massif to the Encantis Massif, and it is by far the most widely distributed of the 3 Pyrenean lizards. It's very similar to the wall lizards, so their size and morphology is very similar to the one we just had before and other wall lizards. And they are very easily observable in the high massifs of the Hautes Pyrenees, up to that of the Pic du Mort de Bigorre in the north. I'm probably like, if anybody here is French watching this video, I'm so sorry for the way I pronounce these. It's not my common tongue. English is barely my common tongue at this point. Where was I? Yeah, so females usually lay their eggs early summer and hatches in the late summer, and they feed on various invertebrates, insects, their larvae, arachnids and worms. Just like, again, I'm going to keep saying this, but again, just like a lot of common small lizards, they will eat the same variety of foods. Now, we've had these snakes before, and we have them over here in the UK. You may have saw it in the UK in episode 1 of the UK, and they are the common adder. So I'll bring up a picture, but I'm not going to go too much into detail on these, just because we have talked about these before. But here is the common adder, and they can be found in the cougar regions. So they're mainly in the north of France, the east, and the Massif, where they grow to a maximum of around 90 centimeters. Very stocky body and a slightly flattened head and are round-nosed. They usually have a red iris with vertical slit oval pupils, as you can see in the photo. And I can zoom in on that eye now, which is just there. Their backs can almost be any colour from pale grey to a dark olive green with darker bands, which provide a zigzag pattern. And underneath, on their underbelly, is usually a greyish blue with an intense dark marks. And they can also be entirely black. These are normally to be found in higher regions around the tree line. I've seen the full black adder over here in the UK. I have seen a full black one, and they look just as beautiful as this one on screen. They have a variety of habitats in France, which includes chalky downs, rocky hillsides, moors, sandy heaths, meadows, rough commons, edges of woods, sunny glades, clearings, scrubland, and they also can be found in salt marshland, but are not found in the warmer parts of France, and as such it is likely that their range is decreasing with climate change. They are most common with other vipers because they are part of the viper family, and they are ovoviviparous, which means they give birth to live young, and they usually are about 4 to 10 each time, and they vary in size from 14 to 22 centimeters. They're very good swimmers, and they often like to swim through water, unlike other vipers. And they are usually found to be eating, again, same as anything, but they can also eat small rodents and birds. They're not usually aggressive, but they will only bite when they are concerned or alarmed or cornered, or if you step on them. And they They do have a slight venom, so they do have a venom, but it's not massively toxic to us humans. The worst case scenario is that if you're very young, elderly, or you have underlying health conditions, you may have a bit more of a reaction to the venom than what anyone else will. If you don't have any of those conditions and you're a fit, normal age like me, the worst it's going to do to you is just going to make you feel really ill. And I believe there is an anti-venom to help combat that effect that it has on you. And they also all snakes in France are a fully protective species, which means you can't actively kill them. So you can't actively go out there and kill them, which I think everywhere should have that rule. They're not out there, all snakes are not out there to get you. Before anybody say that they're very dangerous, they're not. A lot of the time a snake just wants to be left alone and get away from you. And the snakes only usually bite or attack in that sense when they are very like when they feel very threatened and they feel like the only way they can get away from you is by biting you and delivering a lot of the times when snakes bite and when they're venomous, they do what's called a dry bite, which means they don't use any of their venom on you. Because in case you didn't know, every time a snake uses their venom on a human, that's one less venom, one lot of venom that they've just produced that they can't use on food. So in a lot of the times, when they bite and they do deliver a venom, then a lot of the time they're affecting themselves more than anything, because it means they can't actively go out there and catch any prey. I just wanted to put all of that out there before people start going on about me about how snakes are dangerous. They're not. At least I don't think so. So another one we've had before is the smooth snake, and we have got two types of smooth snakes in the UK. Oh, well, in France, sorry, I've already done the UK. But I'll bring one up so you can see it. So this is just the common smooth snake. And these are usually about 50 to 80 centimeters long, but they can be more slender with smoother scales, which can have a marbled effect. In the back has 2 rows of darker brown markings in pairs which join together to form transverse bands, and the underside is a mixture of browns, greys and russets. I'm just going to flick through this one because I went a bit to too much detail with the adder. And they are ovoviviparous, so they give birth between 4 and 14 live young, and they are born after a gestation period of 6 to 12 weeks in a transparent mucus sac, which they then exit being about 20 centimeters long. They're very timid, so they're very docile and very easy. Like if you want to pick one up, probably more than able to if you can catch it, but they are quite fast. Yeah, they like I said, but they do in most cases rarely move very fast. They instead slide away slowly, allowing their colour to blend in with the background a lot easier. And their hibernation is usually between November until March, but it is subject to climate change with a lot of hibernation. So next up we have the Montpellier snake. Which we'll just put. Now this is a very beautiful snake. I quite like this picture of this one. Now these are venomous. Before I go out there and start talking about these anymore, these are a venomous snake. So if you're in France and you're in the regions where these are, don't actively go and pick these up. A lot with most snakes. Take photos from afar and leave a good amount of distance between you and the snake where it doesn't feel threatened. Take photos, but don't actively pick it up. If it's in your way, try to walk around it. That's all I'm going to say. I do the same thing if I ever see any wildlife when I'm out and about. I try to stay out of its way. You're in their territory more than what they're in yours. Now, let's go back onto these. They are rarely implicated in human envenomation, and because of the anatomy, its venom apparatus is generally unsuitable for venom delivery to large mammals. So, if you were to get bitten by one of these, you've probably got more chance of being struck by lightning while on fire, while running through a field full of cows, than being bitten and this snake deliver its venom. They grow to a length of more than 2 meters, and they're looking at their face, and it says here in the notes, and they usually have a menacing and ferocious appearance, which, looking at that face, it does kind of have that. They have large round eyes with round pupils surrounded by clearly visible rims, which you can see in that picture of that eye there. And the snake exhibits significant sexual dimorphism, so the females, always smaller and more slender, have a mottled coloration, alternating spots of black and white, and sometimes yellowish, on a light olive background of mahogany type or slight greenish. And the males are usually a light or a dark olive green with lateral row black and bluish scales. And they're the only venomous caluvier to be found in France, which is a type of snake. But its venom fangs are fixed and set at the back of the mouth, and it is unlikely to cause problems for humans unless they poke their fingers into its mouth. And in the unlikely event of being bitten, the result will be extremely painful but not dangerous for most individuals. The bite will result in stiffness and swelling where bitten, and can produce a state of general lethargy and weakness. This could possibly last a day or two, but in any case, be safe and seek medical attention. And they are only found in the Mediterranean region of France, where they usually spend most of their time on the ground in hot, arid areas with some shrubby low growth for cover. And they can be seen on rocks, stone walls, in vineyards, open woodland, or by the side of rivers. And their diet is most likely lizards, but they also eat small mammals up to the size of rabbits, killing by using their venom, and prey is often chased and followed. And when provoked, they can become very aggressive, inflating their neck and often rising up like a cobra and hissing loudly and invariably trying to bite. However, they are generally discreet, fearful, and have a dislike of water. And coupling is complex, but there is a bond between males and females with extensive foreplay. This commences in April or May, and 8 weeks later up to 20 eggs are laid underneath litter or stones, where they take about 50 days to incubate. And their hibernation takes place usually from October to November until March. Now, if you're ever going out there and you're doing what a lot of people in the industry called herping, which is going out there and looking for reptiles and lizards or anything like that, and you see eggs, don't disturb the eggs. Seriously, please don't disturb the eggs. They are just trying to exist and trying to keep their population, and like most animals and like us humans, it's nature, it's a natural thing, so please don't disrupt eggs. You don't know what could be hiding in amongst those eggs. The mother could still be in there, because a lot of female snakes stick with their eggs. So again, don't actively go out there and kill snakes. They are protected species in France. I believe most countries are, apart from some. Okay.